Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the protector of Class 1A. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The bus ride to the unforeseen simulation joint, the USJ, was filled with the kind of nervous, buzzing energy that only a bus full of teenagers could produce. It was a cacophony of quirks, laughter, and light-hearted teasing. Izuku Midoriya sat near the back, his hands gripping the straps of his hero costume. The green material felt heavy against his skin, a tangible reminder of the legacy he was trying to grow into. He watched Tsuyu Ajiri say exactly what was on her mind to Eijiro Kirishima, and he watched Katsuki Bakugo practically vibrate with suppressed rage at being teased. It was normal. It was safe. Midoriya, Tsuyu said, turning her large eyes toward him. Your quirk is a lot like All Might's. Izuku froze, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Huh? You think so? I mean, super strength is a pretty common category, really. But All Might doesn't get hurt when he uses his, Tsuyu added bluntly, turning back to the front. Izuku let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. She's right, he thought, looking down at his gloved hands. I'm still a glass cannon. One shot and I break. To be a hero, I have to be able to stand. The bus decelerated, the hydraulics hissing as they arrived at the massive dome structure. They filed out, greeted by the space hero, 13. Izuku's fanboy heart fluttered. 13 was a legend in rescue operations. As they walked inside, the sheer scale of the facility took his breath away. Landslides, fires, floods. It was a playground of disaster, designed to teach them how to bring hope to the hopeless. Rescue, 13 was saying, the voice echoing in the vast chamber. It is the pinnacle of heroism. Quirks are not just for fighting villains, they are for saving lives. Saving lives. The words resonated in Izuku's chest. That was what All Might did. He won, yes, but he won so that people could be safe. Then, the lights flickered. It was a subtle change at first. A hum of electricity dying out, followed by the grinding noise of the fountain in the central plaza sputtering to a halt. A heavy, suffocating dread settled over the air, distinct and cold. Stay back! Aizawa's voice was a whip crack, cutting through the confusion. He threw his arm out, barring the students from moving forward. Put your masks on. Now, down in the plaza, the space in front of the fountain began to warp. It was as if reality itself was being bruised. A swirling vortex of deep purple and black expanding like an ink drop in water. A hand reached out. Then a face, covered by a disembodied hand. Then bodies. Dozens of them. Villains, Aizawa growled, his scarf floating upward as his hair stood on end. 13. Protect the students. The panic was immediate. Izuku felt his feet rooted to the floor. Real villains? Here? How? The alarms didn't trigger. I wonder if he'll show up if we kill the kids? A scratchy, dry voice drifted up from the plaza. It was the man covered in hands, his voice carrying in terrifying casualness. Aizawa leaped into action, a blur of black cloth and capture tape. He descended into the horde of villains, fighting with a grace and brutality that mesmerized and horrified Izuku. But there was no time to analyze. We have to move! Ida shouted, herding the class toward the exit. But the exit was gone. Or rather, blocked. The purple mist, the one that had birthed the villains, swirled up from the ground, forming a wall of darkness before them. Greetings, the mist spoke, glowing yellow eyes narrowing. We are the League of Villains. It may be presumptuous of us, but we have invited ourselves into the home of heroes, in order to have All Might, the symbol of peace, take his last breath. The declaration hung in the air, heavy as lead. Kirishima and Bakugo lunged, explosions and hardened fists tearing through the mist, but it was like punching smoke. That was dangerous, the mist, Kurojiri said calmly. Begone. The world spun. Darkness enveloped Izuku. He felt the sensation of falling, the rush of wind, and then, splash, cold water rushed into his nose and mouth. The shock was instant. Izuku thrashed, his heavy boots dragging him down. He opened his eyes to the murky sting of the shipwreck zone. He kicked upward, breaking the surface and gasping for air. Midoriya! a tongue wrapped around his waist, hoisting him out of the water and depositing him onto the deck of a sinking ship. He coughed, wiping water from his eyes to see Tsuyu and Mineta shivering beside him. Thanks, Azui, Izuku gasped. Call me Tsuyu, she said, though her eyes were fixed on the water below. Midoriya. Look! Izuku peered over the railing. The water was teeming with villains. They circled the boat like sharks, their quirks activating, fins, water jets, extended limbs. They're waiting for us, Izuku realized, his mind racing. He forced himself to breathe. Think. Analyze. Why are they waiting? They don't know our quirks. They're cautious. We're gonna die. Mineta screamed, clutching his sticky spheres. We're gonna be drowned by villains. No, we're not, Izuku said, his voice trembling but gaining firmness. We have to fight. It's the only way to survive. He formulated the plan quickly. It was risky. It would hurt. But it was the only variable that resulted in survival. Mineta, I need you to throw everything you have into the water. Tsuyu, grab us and jump the second I move. Are you crazy? Mineta shrieked. Do it! Izuku leaped from the boat. As he fell toward the water, he felt the familiar, terrifying surge of One for All. He didn't focus on his whole arm, just the fingers. Smash! He flicked his fingers with 100% power toward the water surface. The pressure wave was catastrophic. The water displaced violently, creating a massive whirlpool that sucked the villains into a chaotic vortex. The feedback snapped the bones in his thumb and middle finger, shooting agony up his arm, but he bit back the scream. Now! Tsuyu caught him midair, her tongue snagging Mineta, and she launched them toward the shallow shore of the flood zone. They tumbled onto the concrete, wet and gasping. We did it, Mineta wept. We're alive. Izuku cradled his throbbing hand, his eyes scanning the facility. We're not safe yet. We need to assess the situation. They crept toward the edge of the flood zone, peering out toward the central plaza. What Izuku saw made his blood run cold. Mr. Aizawa was losing. The Erasure hero was fighting valiantly, but the sheer number of villains was wearing him down. And standing in the center, watching with bored detachment, was the hand villain, Shigaraki. Beside him stood a monster, a towering creature with exposed brains, beak-like mouth, and muscles that looked like boulders. Eraserhead is cool, Shigaraki muttered, his voice carrying in a lull of the fighting. But he's not the main event. I'm bored. He scratched his neck violently, his skin flaking. Where is All Might? The guide said he would be here. Shigaraki turned, his red eyes scanning the facility. He looked past Aizawa, past the fighting, and his gaze seemed to lock onto the peripheral zones. Maybe if we break the toys, the hero will come running, Shigaraki pointed. Not at Aizawa, but at the students huddled at the edge of the flood zone. Noma. Kill the loud ones? Aizawa's eyes widened. He tried to turn, to erase the creature's quirk, but a villain with 4 arms slammed him into the ground. The monster, the Nomu, vanished. It didn't run, it simply ceased to be in one spot and appeared in another. There was a gust of wind, a sonic boom that arrived seconds late. Izuku blinked. 1 second, the plaza was empty. The next, a towering shadow blocked out the artificial lights of the USJ. The Nomu stood directly in front of them, on the edge of the water. It radiated a pressure so intense it felt like gravity had doubled. Mineta froze, his mouth open in a silent scream. Tsuyu, usually so composed, flinched back. The Nomu raised a fist the size of a cinder block. Its target was Tsuyu. Time seemed to slow down for Izuku. He saw the trajectory of the punch. It was a killing blow. There was no hesitation in the creature's movement, no morality. It was a biological weapon designed to obliterate. Aizawa-sensei is down. All Might isn't here. Tsuyu can't dodge that fast. The analysis ran through Izuku's mind in a fraction of a second. He looked at the Nomu. He thought of One for All. He thought of the beach, the trash, the dream of standing atop a podium with a smile. If I punch it, I break my arm. If I break my arm, it might not even flinch. It took Aizawa's capture scarf like it was nothing. I can't win. The realization was a sharp, cold knife in his gut. He could not defeat this monster. He was a quirkless boy who had been given a sword he couldn't lift. But a voice whispered in the back of his mind, a primal, desperate voice. You don't have to win. You just have to make sure she doesn't die. His body moved before his brain gave the command. It wasn't the heroic dash he had practiced in his head 1,000 times. It was a desperate, ugly lunge. Izuku didn't wind up a punch. He didn't prepare a smash. He threw himself forward, shoving Tsuyu and Mineta violently to the side, and planted his feet. He crossed his arms in an X over his chest, channeling one for all not into a strike, but into a full-body brace. Full cowling was a concept he hadn't invented yet, but instinct flooded his legs and torso with power, tightening his muscles until they were hard as iron. Run! He screamed. The Noma's fist connected. Crack. The sound was sickening. It wasn't the sound of a punch. It was the sound of a car hitting a wall. Izuku felt the impact in his marrow. The force traveled through his forearms, shattering both ulna and radius instantly. It slammed into his chest, cracking ribs like dry twigs. The air was forced out of his lungs in a bloody mist. But he didn't fly backward. He had dug his heels into the concrete, his enhanced strength grounding him. He became an anchor. The concrete beneath his boots exploded, creating a crater, and he slid back 2 meters, carving deep grooves into the floor. But he was still standing. The dust settled. The silence was deafening. Tsuyu, sprawled on the ground a few feet away, stared up in horror. Midoriya? Izuku stood trembling. His arms hung uselessly at his sides, twisted at wrong angles. His breathing was ragged, wet gurgles escaping his throat. Blood dripped from his chin onto the green of his costume. The Noma tilted its head, its bird-like eyes unblinking. It seemed confused that the obstacle hadn't been obliterated. Izuku wheezed. He looked up, his eyes burning with a green electricity that seemed to arc off his skin. The pain was blinding, white-hot and encompassing, but beneath the pain was a terrifying clarity. He wasn't dead. Tsuyu wasn't dead. The equation had changed. The goal was no longer defeat the villain. The goal was protect the assets, I said. Izuku spat a mouthful of blood at the monster's feet. Run! Shigaraki, watching from the plaza, stopped scratching his neck. Oh? It didn't turn into paste? Nomu, hit it again. The Nomu raised its other fist. Midoriya, no! Mineta screamed. Izuku didn't look back. He couldn't. If he looked back, he would see their fear, and he would crumble. He had to be the wall. My arms are gone. I can't block. The Noma swung. A horizontal backhand intended to decapitate. Izuku dropped. He didn't dodge to escape. He dodged to intercept. He threw his shoulder into the Noma's midsection. It was like tackling a steel beam. One for all surged through his legs, and he pushed. It was pathetic compared to all might. It didn't even move the Noma an inch. But the impact disrupted the creature's balance just enough that the swing went high, missing Izuku's head by millimeters. The wind pressure sheared the cowl of his costume, exposing his messy green hair. Izuku screamed, a raw, animalistic sound, and drove his head forward, ahead but straight into the Noma's exposed solar plexus. It did nothing to the monster. But the recoil sent Izuku stumbling back, dizzy and concussed. Pain. So much pain. Why aren't you running? Izuku yelled at his friends, his voice cracking. He stood wobbly, placing himself firmly between the monster and his classmates again. Go get Aizawa-sensei. Go! We can't leave you! Tsuyu cried, tears welling in her eyes. You're in the way! Izuku snarled. It was the first time he had ever spoken to anyone with such venom. It wasn't malice, it was desperation. If you stay, I can't protect you. Go! The sheer intensity of his aura, the bloodlust of a cornered animal, made them flinch. Tsuyu grabbed a paralyzed Mineta and leaped, using her powerful legs to bound toward the central plaza, looking back with a heartbroken expression. Good, Izuku thought, his vision swimming. They're moving. He turned his attention back to the Nomu. The creature loomed over him. You're an interesting bug, Shigaraki's voice carried over. You're broken. Why do you stand? Izuku panted, his chest heaving unevenly. Because. He gritted his teeth, blood staining them red. I am the Deku who saves. The Nomu struck again. This time, Izuku couldn't block. He couldn't dodge. He just took it. He leaped into the punch, turning his body so the blow hit his back. Thud. He was launched this time. He flew through the air, skipping across the water of the flood zone like a stone, before crashing into the shipwreck they had just escaped from. The metal groaned as his body dented the hull. Midoriya! Tsuyu screamed from the distance. Izuku slid down the metal, landing in a heap on the deck. Everything went black for a second. Stay down, his brain begged. It's over. You did enough. But then he saw it. The Noma was turning. It was looking at Tsuyu again. No. A spark ignited in the darkness of his unconsciousness. The embers of One for All roared into a bonfire. It wasn't the triumphant fire of a hero. It was the desperate, consuming fire of a martyr. Move, move. Izuku's fingers twitched. He forced his broken body to obey. He grabbed the railing with his teeth, literally biting into the metal, to haul himself up because his arms wouldn't work. He scrambled over the side of the boat, falling into the shallow water. He couldn't run. His legs were trembling so hard they felt like jelly. But he moved. A shuffle. A stumble. A limp. The Noma was preparing to jump toward Tsuyu. Hey! The scream tore from Izuku's throat, raw and bloody. Hey! Ugly! The Noma stopped. It turned its head slowly. Izuku stood in the shallow water, swaying. He looked like a corpse that had refused to die. His costume was in tatters. His right arm was purple and swollen to twice its size. His left hung by a thread. His face was a mask of crimson, but his eyes were wide, manic, and fixated solely on the threat. Over, here, Izuku wheezed. He channeled power into his legs again. The green lightning crackled, angry and unstable. I'm not done. Shigaraki scratched his neck, agitated. He's annoying. He's cheating. A level 1 player shouldn't be tanking a boss like this. Noma. Finish him. Rip him apart. The Noma screeched and launched itself at Izuku. Izuku watched death approaching. He didn't close his eyes. He calculated. It's coming fast. Straight line. I can't stop it. I have to redirect it. He waited until the last possible microsecond. As the Noma reached him, Izuku dropped to his knees. The wind of the creature's passage tore at his skin. As the Noma passed over him, Izuku kicked upward. He didn't kick the Noma. He kicked the debris floating in the water, a large piece of metal hull, launching it into the Noma's path. The Noma smashed through the metal, shredding it, but the momentary obstruction slowed it down. It landed, skidding, and turned back to Izuku. Izuku stood up again. He was crying now. Tears of agony streamed down his face, mixing with the blood. He was terrified. He wanted his mom. He wanted All Might, but he stood there. Come on, he whispered. The Noma charged. A fist raised to crush Izuku's skull. Izuku braced himself to die. He hoped Tsuyu had gotten far enough away. He hoped Aizawa was okay. He hoped. Boom. The doors of the USJ exploded inward. Smoke billowed. A silhouette stood in the entrance, illuminated by the daylight from outside. The tie had been ripped off. The smile was gone. I am here, the voice shook the dome. But there was no joy in it. Only fury. All Might. Mineta sobbed from where he and Tsuyu were hiding. The Noma paused, its programming overriding its current target. The threat level of the newcomer was higher. All Might moved faster than the eye could follow. In a blink, he was in the flood zone. He scooped up Izuku, moving so fast the wind buffeted the boy's broken body. All Might landed near the entrance, gently setting Izuku down near Aizawa, who was unconscious and badly beaten. Young Midoriya, All Might whispered, his voice trembling. The number 1 hero looked at the boy, at the mangled arms, the caved-in chest, the blood. All Might's hands hovered, afraid to touch him and cause more pain. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Izuku's eyes were unfocused. He blinked, trying to see through the haze. All Might? Rest now, my boy. You did well. You did more than enough. All Might stood up, turning toward the villains. The air pressure in the USJ dropped. The symbol of peace was radiating pure, unadulterated rage. You hurt my students, All Might growled, stepping toward the plaza. You will regret this. The battle that followed was a blur of titans. All Might and the Noma clashed with force that shattered the windows of the dome. Shockwaves ripped up the pavement, but Izuku didn't pass out. Midoriya! Ochako Uraraka ran over, followed by Sato and Siro. Oh my god, Deku! Uraraka fell to her knees, her hands hovering over his chest. She was pale, looking as if she might be sick. Your arms. Is everyone? Izuku coughed, a bubble of blood forming on his lips. Is everyone safe? Yes. Yes, everyone is okay. Uraraka cried. Stop talking. You're hurt bad. Aizawa-sensei? He's breathing. He's alive, Siro confirmed, looking shaken. Izuku nodded weakly. His job was done. The assets were safe. Boom, another shockwave. Izuku flinched. He looked toward the fight. All Might was winning, but he was struggling. The Noma was absorbing the punches. Izuku tried to stand up. What are you doing? Sato yelled, grabbing Izuku's shoulder gently. Stay down, man, Izuku gritted his teeth, fighting the darkness encroaching on his vision. He has a time limit. He's pushing it. You can't help him like this. Uraraka pleaded. I can be a shield, Izuku mumbled, delirium setting in. If he gets tired, I can take a hit. One more hit. No! Uraraka grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. No more hits. You've done enough. Look at yourself, Deku. You're destroying yourself. Izuku looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the terror in her eyes. Not terror of the villains, but terror for him. I have to protect. He whispered, the words slipping away as his adrenaline finally crashed. Plus Ultra! All Might's roar echoed through the facility. With a final, earth-shattering impact, All Might punched the Noma through the ceiling of the USJ, sending it skyrocketing into the stratosphere. The silence that followed was heavy. The villains, seeing their champion defeated, began to panic. Shigaraki scratched his neck furiously, muttering about game over. Kurojairi expanded his mist to retreat. Snipe, the pro-hero who had just arrived with the backup, fired a shot, hitting Shigaraki in the leg and arm, but the villains managed to slip through the portal. It was over. All Might stood amidst the smoke, steam rising from his body. He reverted to his skeletal form as the steam cleared, but the students were too far back to see. Izuku watched until the very end. He watched until the police arrived. He watched until the paramedics rushed in with stretchers. We have a code red here. A paramedic shouted, kneeling beside Izuku. Multiple fractures. Internal bleeding. Possible lung puncture. Get the stasis stretcher. As they lifted him, Izuku's head lolled to the side. He saw Tsuyu standing nearby, wrapped in a shock blanket. She was staring at him, her hand over her mouth. Their eyes met. Izuku tried to smile. He tried to give her the reassuring smile All Might gave. I am here. You are safe. But with his broken face and haunted eyes, it didn't look like a hero's smile. It looked like a soldier who had seen hell. You're safe, he mouthed. Then, finally, the darkness took him. Recovery Girl's office 2 days later. The beeping of the heart monitor was the first thing Izuku heard. It was a steady, rhythmic sound that anchored him to reality. He opened his eyes. The ceiling was white. The smell of antiseptic was sharp. You're awake. The voice was gruff, tired. Izuku turned his head stiffly. Sitting in a chair beside the bed was Recovery Girl. But standing by the window, looking out with his back to the room, was All Might. And in the corner, looking like a mummy wrapped in bandages, was Aizawa. As sensei? Izuku croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. All Might? Don't try to move, Recovery Girl scolded gently. She hopped down from her stool. You've been out for 48 hours. I've had to do 3 sessions of healing just to get your bones back in the right places. Your arms. Izuku, dear, they were pulverized. Izuku looked down at his arms. They were encased in heavy casts, slinged up to his chest. He could feel the deep, throbbing ache in his ribs. The others? Izuku asked immediately. Tsuyu? Mineta? Everyone else? They are fine, Aizawa said. He turned around. His face was covered in bandages, only one eye visible. Physically, at least. They're shaken up. Aizawa walked closer to the bed. He looked down at Izuku with an expression that was hard to read. It wasn't the usual boredom. It was something sharper. Midoriya, Aizawa said. Why did you do that? Do what? You jumped in front of the Noma, Aizawa said flatly. You didn't attack it. You didn't try to distract it from a distance. You used your body as a barricade. It was going to kill Ajiri, Izuku said, his voice quiet but steady. I analyzed the situation. I couldn't beat it. My quirk. If I used 100% to punch it, and it didn't work, I would be useless and defenseless. But if I braced myself, if I took the hit, I could buy time. All Might turned from the window. He looked older, more frail than usual. Young Midoriya. You saved them. There is no doubt about that. But you threw your life away. Aizawa finished the sentence harshly. Izuku blinked. I didn't throw it away. I spent it. The room went silent. I spent it to buy their lives, Izuku continued, his eyes drifting to the ceiling. That's what the power is for, isn't it? One for all. It's for everyone else. If I have to break every bone in my body to keep Class 1A safe, then that's the price. It's a fair trade, Recovery Girl gasped softly. All Might looked stricken, his hand gripping the windowsill until the wood creaked. Aizawa narrowed his eye. He saw it then. He saw the shift. This wasn't just a kid who wanted to be cool. This wasn't a kid chasing glory. This was a kid who had looked death in the face and decided that his own survival was optional. That is a dangerous way to think, problem child, Aizawa said, his voice low. If you break, who protects them next time? Then I'll just have to get stronger, Izuku whispered, closing his eyes as exhaustion pulled him back down. So I don't break as fast. As Izuku drifted back to sleep, the three adults remained in the room. He's traumatized, Recovery Girl said softly. The instinct to preserve his own life, it's been suppressed. He's not trying to win anymore, All Might said, his voice full of regret. He's just trying to save. Aizawa looked at the sleeping boy, the boy who had become a wall of flesh and bone to save his classmates. He's going to get himself killed, Aizawa muttered. Not if I can help it. But as he looked at the casts on Izuku's arms, Aizawa knew one thing for certain. The bright-eyed, nervous boy who had walked into the SJ was gone. In his place was something else. Something harder. Something broken. The protector of Class 1A had been born in blood. And this was only the beginning. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was aggressive. It wasn't the rhythmic, flowing scrawl of a student taking notes. It was a jagged, digging sound, like a needle etching into glass. Scratch. Scratch. Snap. The tip of the pen broke. Ink bled into the cheap paper of the notebook, forming a dark, Rorschach test blot that swallowed the word optimism. Izuku Midoriya stared at the ink. He didn't curse. He didn't sigh. He simply opened his drawer, retrieved a new pen, and continued writing. He didn't bother to wipe the ink from his fingertips. His bedroom was quiet. Too quiet. The All Might posters that plastered the walls, usually a source of comfort, a shrine to the symbol of peace, felt different now. Their smiles didn't look reassuring. They looked static. Frozen. Ignorant of the things lurking in the peripheral vision, Izuku looked down at the notebook. It was a fresh one, purchased on the way home from the hospital yesterday. The cover didn't say Hero Analysis for the Future number 14. He had taken a thick black marker and written a single word across the front. Contingencies. He turned the page. Entry. Tsuyu Ajiri. Quirk, frog. Capabilities. High mobility in water, camouflage, prehensile tongue, max length approximate 20 m. Vulnerabilities. Extreme cold induces hibernation. Skin desiccation in heat/dry environments. Soft tissue damage risk. Defensive protocol. In the event of thermal attack, fire/ice, Ajiri requires immediate shielding. Her mobility is her primary defense, but in confined spaces, like the shipwreck zone, she is a sitting duck. I must maintain a 5-meter proximity in aquatic environments to act as a physical buffer against blunt force trauma. Izuku read the words back. They were cold. clinical. They stripped his friend down to a set of mechanics, inputs, outputs, and breaking points. A week ago, he would have written about how cool her camouflage was, or how she could be a great rescue hero. Now, he was writing about how easily she could die if the temperature dropped 10 degrees. He rubbed his eyes. The phantom sensation of broken bones still lingered in his arms. Recovery Girl had done miracles, accelerating his natural healing, but the memory of the pain, the crack of the ulna, the snap of the radius, was etched into his nervous system. He wasn't healed. He was just put back together. Izuku? The voice made him jump. He spun in his chair, his hands coming up instantly in a guard position, fists clenched. His mother Inko stood in the doorway, holding a basket of laundry. She flinched, dropping the basket. Socks and shirts spilled onto the floor. Izuku? She stammered, her eyes wide with fear. It's just me. I knocked. Izuku lowered his hands slowly. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Sorry, Mom. I didn't hear the knock. I was focused. Inko looked at him. She looked at the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders that never seemed to leave, even when he was sitting down. She looked at the cast that still remained on his right arm, a reminder of the fracture he told her he got during training. He hadn't told her the full extent. He hadn't told her he tried to headbutt a biological weapon. Are you okay, honey? She asked, stepping into the room cautiously, as if approaching a wild animal. You've been in here for hours. You haven't touched your dinner. I'm analyzing, Izuku said, turning back to the notebook. I fell behind. The USJ incident showed me that I'm not prepared. I didn't know enough. I reacted too slowly. Izuku, Inko said, her voice trembling. You were attacked by villains. You're a child. You weren't supposed to be prepared for that. I have a quirk now, Mom, Izuku said, his voice flat. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. If he saw her crying, he might crack. I'm in the hero course. Child is just a label. The villains didn't care about that label. The Nomu didn't care. He closed the notebook with a sharp thud. If I want to survive, if I want them to survive, I can't think like a child anymore. Inko stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. She wanted to hug him. She wanted to tell him to quit, to come back to being her quirkless, safe little boy. But she saw the set of his jaw. It was the same expression he had when he watched the video of All Might saving people from the fire. But the wonder was gone. Only duty remained. Just try to sleep, okay? She whispered. I will, Izuku lied. He waited until her footsteps faded down the hall. Then he opened the notebook again. Entry, Minoru Mineta. Quirk, pop-off. Vulnerabilities, panic response freezes motor functions. Low physical durability. Small stature makes him a target for grappling. Defensive protocol. Must be physically carried or thrown to safety in 90% of combat scenarios. UA High School the next day. The atmosphere in Class 1A was strange. Usually, the return to school after a break was filled with chatter about video games or TV shows. Today, the air was thick with a peculiar kind of celebrity. The news had run the story of the USJ attack nonstop. They were the class that survived the League of Villains. As Izuku walked through the oversized door, the chatter stopped for a split second, then resumed at double volume. Midoriya! Kirishima was the first to approach, his grin sharp and toothy, but his eyes concerned. Man, you're back. We were worried when you didn't answer the group chat. I was recovering, Izuku said, walking to his desk. He didn't smile. He scanned the room. Windows intact. Door mechanism functioning. Seating arrangement, suboptimal. I sit near the back door, but Hagakure is near the front. If a breach happens at the main entrance, she's the first line of contact. She has no physical defense. Dude, you were crazy out there, Siro said, leaning back in his chair. I heard from Ajri that you actually took a hit from that monster? The one that fought All Might? Yeah, Kaminari added, shuddering. That thing was a nightmare. I can't believe you stood up to it without a combat quirk. I didn't stand up to it, Izuku corrected, setting his bag down. He began arranging his pencils in a perfect line, parallel to the edge of the desk. I intercepted it. Same difference, isn't it? Uraraka chirped, appearing at his side. She looked relieved to see him. I'm just glad you're okay, Deku-kun. You looked really scary when they took you away. Izuku looked up at her. Uraraka. Zero gravity. Vulnerabilities, nausea limit. Requires physical contact to activate quirk. If her hands are restrained, she is neutralized. Floating targets are easy pickings for ranged attackers if not tethered. I'm fine, Uraraka-san, Izuku said. His eyes flicked to the window again as a shadow of a bird passed by. His muscles tensed, then relaxed. Just bruises. Midoriya, Ida's booming voice cut through the group. The class representative marched over, chopping his hand in the air. I must apologize. As the class representative, I should have been the one to ensure the safety of the rear guard. Instead, I ran to get help, leaving you to burden the physical toll of protecting our classmates. It is a failure of my leadership. You did the right thing, Ida-kun, Izuku said calmly. You were the fastest. You were the only variable that could change the outcome. Strategically, your retreat was the win condition. Ida blinked. Strategically? Well, yes, but, as a friend. Friends don't matter if we're dead, Izuku said. The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Uraraka's smile faltered. Kirishima scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. Even Bakugo, who had been brooding in his seat with his feet up on the desk, glanced over with narrowed red eyes. Whoa, grim much? Kaminari laughed nervously. Practical, Izuku muttered, pulling out his notebook. The door slid open. Instantly, Izuku's head snapped toward it, his eyes locking onto the figure entering. It was Aizawa. Or what was left of him. The erasure hero was wrapped in bandages from head to toe. His arms were in slings. His face was a mask of gauze. He looked more like a walking corpse than a teacher. Morning, Aizawa mumbled through the bandages. Sensei, you're here already? The class shouted in unison. You're a mummy! My well-being is irrelevant, Aizawa rasped, limping to the podium. The fight isn't over. The class stiffened. Fight? Mineta squeaked, tears already forming. More villains? No, Aizawa said. The UA Sports Festival is approaching. The tension broke instantly. That's a supernormal school event. Kirishima cheered. Wait, Kaminari interrupted. Is that safe? We just got attacked. Are they really going to hold a huge public event? It's necessary to demonstrate that UA's crisis management system is solid, Aizawa explained. Security will be 5 times higher than previous years. This is your chance. You know the drill. Pro heroes will be watching. If you want to be scouted, this is it. The class erupted into excitement. Everyone wanted to show off. Everyone wanted to win, except Izuku. He stared at the back of Aizawa's head. Security 5 times higher. That implies they expect a second strike. A massive public gathering. Thousands of civilians. A stadium is a bull. If they block the exits, it's a killing jar. Class 1A will be spread out. Solo events. I can't cover them. His hand began to shake. He gripped his pen until his knuckles turned white. I have to analyze everyone. I have to know their limits. If I meet them in the tournament, I can't just beat them. I have to test their defenses. I have to make sure they can survive without me. Midoriya? He looked up. Aizawa was staring at him with his one visible eye. You're muttering, Aizawa said. Sorry, Sensei, Izuku said automatically. But he wasn't sorry. He was planning. Lunch rush cafeteria. The cafeteria was a cacophony of noise. Clattering trays, shouting students, the sizzle of food. To most, it was the sound of lunch. To Izuku, it was sensory overload. He sat at a table with Uraraka and Ida. But unlike his usual demeanor, eagerly eating katsudon and chatting about heroes, he was barely touching his food. His tray was pushed to the side. In front of him was the notebook. Deku-kun, you have to eat, Uraraka said, poking his arm gently. You're healing, remember? Recovery girls said you need protein. I'm eating, Izuku said, taking a mechanical bite of rice without looking away from the entrance of the cafeteria. You're staring at the door again, Ida noted, adjusting his glasses. Are you expecting someone? The entrance creates a bottleneck, Izuku murmured. If a panic starts, the stampede will cause more injuries than an attacker. We're sitting in the middle zone, too far from the kitchen exit, too close to the main flow, Midoriya, Ida said, putting his chopsticks down. You are exhibiting signs of hypervigilance. It is understandable given the trauma, but we are safe here. This is the main campus. The barrier is intact. The barrier was intact at the USJ too, Izuku countered. And the alarm didn't go off. Ida flinched. That is true. But, I'm not trying to scare you, Izuku said, finally looking at them. His eyes were intense, devoid of the usual sparkle. I'm just assessing the variables. Ida-kun, your engines. What's your stall time if the radiator pipes are crushed? I beg your pardon? If someone targets your legs with crushing force, specifically the exhaust ports. Do you have a manual purge? Or do you overheat instantly? Well, I suppose I would overheat, but you need armor on your calves, Izuku scribbled in the book. Reinforced plating. You prioritize speed, but speed is useless if the engine is compromised. He turned to Uraraka. And you? You float things. But you have no propulsion. If you float yourself to escape, you're at the mercy of the wind or momentum. You need a grappling hook or airburst thrusters to control your vector. Deku-kun, Uraraka said, her smile vanishing. You're freaking me out. I'm trying to keep you alive! Izuku snapped. The shout was louder than he intended. Several nearby tables went quiet. People looked over. Izuku froze. He saw the eyes on him. He felt the heat rising in his cheeks, but not from embarrassment. From frustration. Why couldn't they see it? The world wasn't a game. It wasn't a comic book. It was fragile. Izuku lowered his voice. I just want to make sure you're ready. For the sports festival. Everyone will be watching. Including villains, Midoriya, Ida said softly. We appreciate your concern. Truly. But you are taking on a burden that is not yours. We are aspiring heroes, yes? We are learning to protect ourselves. You weren't ready at the USJ, Izuku said. It wasn't an insult. It was a fact. Nobody was. Not even Aizawa-sensei. He stood up, grabbing his notebook. I'm going to the library. It's quieter there. Better sight lines. He walked away, leaving his half-eaten katsudon behind. Uraraka watched him go, her brow furrowed. He's really messed up about this, isn't he? He took the brunt of the attack, Ida said solemnly. He stood between death and us. It seems he has not yet stepped away from that position. Hero Basic Training Afternoon Session. All right, listen up. All Might's voice boomed across the training ground, though it lacked a fraction of its usual luster. He was in his buff form, but he was conserving energy. He stood at the entrance to Field Gamma, a labyrinth of industrial pipes and steel beams. Today, we are doing a rescue race, All Might announced. However, since we are prepping for the sports festival, this will be an obstacle course. You will race in groups of 4. First one to the center wins, but be careful, this place is a maze, the class cheered. Group 1. All Might shouted. Midoriya. Siro. Ojiro. Ashido. Step up. Izuku stepped to the starting line. He adjusted his gloves. He wasn't wearing his costume, it was still being repaired. He was in his P uniform, readied. All Might raised his hand. Start. Siro launched himself instantly, tape shooting from his elbows to swing from the pipes. See you later, guys. Ashido skated along the ground on her acid, moving fluidly. Ojiro used his tail to parkour off the walls. Izuku didn't move instantly. He activated One for All, full cowling at 5%. Green lightning crackled around him. He took off. But he didn't follow the direct path. Siro was ahead, swinging high. Siro relies on structural integrity for his tape, Izuku thought. That pipe he's aiming for, it's rusted. Izuku saw the rust patch on the overhead beam. Siro was swinging toward it. If the tape stuck to the rust, it might peel off the metal, causing a fall from 20 feet. Izuku changed trajectory. He leaped off a wall, bounding upward. Midoriya? Siro called out, looking back. Trying to catch up? Izuku didn't answer. He reached the rusted pipe a split second before Siro's tape could connect. He slammed his fist into the pipe, bending it inward and knocking the rust loose, but also creating a jagged, sturdy hook point. Ciro's tape hit the fresh bend, sticking firmly. Whoa! Ciro laughed, swinging past. Thanks for the assist, but this is a race. Izuku landed on a catwalk and kept running. Below, Ashido was sliding around a corner. Izuku's eyes scanned the floor. There was a loose grate. If she hit it with her acid, the chemical reaction coupled with the loose bolts could cause the floor to collapse. Izuku dropped from the catwalk. He landed heavily on the grate right before Ashido reached it, stomping on the loose corner to jam it back into place. Eep! Ashido skidded to a halt to avoid hitting him. Midoriya! Watch it! Floor unstable, Izuku grunted, vaulting over a railing and continuing. Weirdo! Ashido yelled, skating around him. Izuku continued this pattern. He kicked debris out of Ojiro's landing zone. He smashed a steam vent that was hissing too loudly, sealing it so the steam wouldn't blind anyone. By the time he reached the finish line, Ciro was already celebrating. I won! I won! Ciro cheered. Ojiro came in second. Ashido third. Izuku jogged in last. He wasn't out of breath. He wasn't sweating from exertion, but from stress. Young Midoriya! All Might called out, walking over. He had a clipboard in his hand. That was an interesting performance. I lost, Izuku said simply. You did, All Might agreed. You have the speed to win. Why did you stop 3 times? The course wasn't safe, Izuku said. Ciro's anchor point was compromised. The grate on level 2 was loose. Vent 4 was obscuring visibility. All Might looked at the boy. Midoriya. The objective was to win the race. I can't win if my team is injured on the way to the objective, Izuku said. They aren't your team right now, All Might said gently, placing a massive hand on Izuku's shoulder. They are your rivals. In the sports festival, you will have to leave them behind. Izuku looked at All Might's hand. He remembered the feeling of All Might's grip when he pulled him from the wreckage at the USJ. With all due respect, All Might, Izuku said, his voice quiet. You weren't there when the Nomu attacked Tsuyu. You didn't see how fragile they are. All Might stiffened. The guilt flashed across his face. I can't leave them behind, Izuku said. Because if I do, and something happens, it's on me. I'm the one with the power. I'm the one who's supposed to take it. He walked away to join the rest of the class, leaving the symbol of peace standing in stunned silence. The archive room late afternoon. School had ended an hour ago. Most students had gone home, or were training in the gym. Izuku was in the library, in the back corner where the old Hero Fight archives were stored. He had a stack of DVDs and books on the table. Title: The Hosa's City Disaster Casualty Analysis. Title: Structural Failures and Stadium Events. Title: Villain Psychology. Target Prioritization. He was watching a video of a stadium collapse from 10 years ago on his laptop. He watched the way the heroes moved. They prioritized the VIPs. The civilians in the cheap seats were the last to be evacuated. Midoriya. Izuku didn't jump this time. He had heard the footsteps coming from the corridor. Specifically the heavy, rhythmic stomp of Bakugo, and the lighter steps of Uraraka and Ida. He paused the video. Kaken. Bakugo stood at the end of the aisle, hands in his pockets. He looked pissed off, which was normal, but there was a tightness around his eyes that was new. Uraraka and Ida stood behind him, looking worried. The hell are you doing, nerd? Bakugo growled. Roundface said you were having a breakdown in the library? I'm studying, Izuku said. Bakugo walked forward and looked at the screen. He saw the grainy footage of a stadium crumbling. He saw the open books on casualty rates. This isn't studying, Bakugo scoffed. This is moping. It's risk assessment, Izuku corrected. It's cowardice, Bakugo spat. Izuku stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the floor. What did you say? You heard me. Bakugo stepped into Izuku's personal space. Smoke curled from his palms. Ever since the USJ, you've been acting like a spooked stray dog. Checking corners. Watching exits. Losing races on purpose to fix the floor. It's pathetic. I'm making sure we don't die. Izuku shouted. We didn't die. Bakugo shouted back. We won. We kicked their asses. All Might won. Izuku yelled, his control snapping. You didn't do anything, Kaken. You and Kirishima tried to hit Kurogyri and almost got warped into oblivion. If you had touched the mist a second earlier, you'd be gone. Bakugo flinched. The truth of it, the helplessness he had felt, stung. And you? Bakugo snarled, deflecting. You broke yourself. Again. You think you're some kind of martyr? You think because you have a fancy quirk now, you're the only one who can take a hit? I'm the only one who can take that hit, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He held up his right arm. This arm? It's stronger than yours. It's stronger than anyone's. If something like the Nomu comes back, I have to be the one in front. Because if it hits you, Kaken, you won't get back up. Bakugo stared at him. For the first time in his life, Bakugo didn't have a comeback. He looked at the determination in Izuku's eyes, a twisted, self-sacrificial determination that made him sick. You're looking down on me, Bakugo whispered, his voice shaking with rage. You think I'm weak? You think I need Deku to protect me? I think you're human, Izuku said. And the things coming for us aren't. Deku-kun, stop, Uraraka interjected, stepping between them. She looked close to tears. You're hurting him. You're hurting everyone. I'm trying to save everyone. Izuku insisted, looking at her. By scaring us? Uraraka asked. By treating us like glass dolls? We're training to be heroes, Deku. We know the risks. But you're acting like we're already dead and you're just waiting for the funeral. Ida stepped forward, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Midoriya. We admire your bravery. But bravery without trust is just arrogance. You must trust us to watch our own backs. Izuku looked at them. He saw Bakugo's wounded pride, Uraraka's fear, Ida's pleading. He wanted to trust them. He really did. But then the image flashed in his mind. The gnome's fist inches from Tsuyu's face. The sound of her terrified gasp. The logic overrode the emotion. Trust is a variable. Variables introduce error. Physical barriers are absolute. I trust you to be heroes, Izuku said, pulling away from Ida's grip. He began packing his books. But until you can tank a hit that levels a building, I'm going to be the wall. He slung his bag over his shoulder. See you at the sports festival, Izuku said. He walked past Bakugo. Bakugo didn't try to stop him. He just stood there, hands trembling, watching the back of the boy who used to follow him everywhere. Now, Izuku wasn't following. He was walking ahead. Not to lead, but to check for landmines. The Midoriya apartment night, Izuku sat at his desk again. The encounter in the library replayed in his mind. He knew he had hurt them. He knew Kaken hated him more than ever now. But it didn't matter. Feelings are secondary. Survival is primary. He opened the notebook to a new page. Subject: the sports festival. He began to draw a diagram of the stadium. Threat vectors. 1. Airborne villains dropping into the arena. 2. Subterranean villains breaching the field. 3. Poison gas in the ventilation. 4. Sniper fire from the stands. He looked at the list. It was paranoid. It was crazy. But then he wrote down a name. Shoto Todoroki. He tapped the pen on the paper. Quirk: half cold, half hot. Observation: he can freeze an entire building in seconds. In a crowded stadium, his eyes could trap civilians or cause hypothermia in seconds if he loses control. Analysis: if I fight him, I must force him to use his fire. It was a strange thought. Why fire? Because if he uses ice on a massive scale, the structural integrity of the stadium might fail due to thermal contraction. Fire is dangerous, but ice is heavy. I need to keep the arena warm. Izuku sighed. He was tired. His bones ached. His head pounded. He looked at the All Might figure on his desk. The plastic smile seemed to mock him. I am here, Izuku whispered to the empty room. But it didn't sound like a promise of hope. It sounded like a statement of position. I am here. Between them and the dark. He picked up the pen and kept writing. He wouldn't sleep tonight. There were too many variables to calculate. The roar of the stadium was a physical force. It vibrated in the concrete walls of the waiting room, shaking dust from the ceiling tiles. To most of Class 1A, it sounded like excitement, glory, and the promise of a future career. To Izuku Midoriya, it sounded like a threat. He sat on a bench in the corner of the prep room, his eyes darting back and forth. His notebook lay open on his lap, but he wasn't reading it. He was listening. 70,000 people, his mind recited. Density high. Evacuation routes, limited. Security presence, pro-heroes present, but spread thin across the perimeter. If a villain initiates a mass casualty event in the stands, the panic alone will cause a crush-kill rate of approximately 12%. He tightened the laces of his red boots. He wasn't wearing the P uniform loosely like the others. He had taped his wrists and ankles. He had requested permission to wear a mouthguard, claiming he had a jaw injury from training. It was a lie. He wore it because he expected to be hit, and he couldn't afford a concussion to take him out of the protection detail. Midoriya. The room went quiet. Shoto Todoroki stood at the entrance to the locker area. The dual-haired boy's expression was unreadable, cold as the ice he commanded. Izuku looked up. His eyes were dark, lacking their usual nervous shimmer. Todoroki-kun. Objectively speaking, I'm stronger than you, Todoroki stated flatly. Yeah, Izuku replied. He didn't flinch. He didn't stutter. He just acknowledged the data point. But All Might has his eyes on you, doesn't he? Todoroki continued, narrowing his eyes. I'm not here to make friends. I'm going to beat you. Kirishima stood up, sensing the tension. Whoa, hey, Todoroki. What's with the aggression all of a sudden? We're about to start. I'm not here to play nice, Todoroki said, turning away. Todoroki, Izuku's voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it had a strange, heavy quality to it. Todoroki stopped. Your ice, Izuku said, standing up. It's structural. If you use it on a massive scale in the stadium, be careful of the thermal expansion in the concrete. If you crack the foundation of the stands, people will fall. Todoroki blinked, genuinely taken aback. He had expected a counter-challenge. He had expected spirit. He hadn't expected a safety regulation lecture. What? Just keep it under control, Izuku said, walking past him toward the tunnel. If you endanger the audience, I'll stop you. It doesn't matter if you're stronger. He walked into the darkness of the tunnel, leaving a confused silence in his wake. Bakugo watched him go, his teeth grinding. He's doing it again. Acting like he's the only adult in the room. Event 1, the obstacle race. Start. Present mix scream was the trigger. The heavy steel gates ground open, and the stampede began. It was exactly what Izuku had feared. The tunnel was too narrow. Hundreds of students from all courses shoved forward, a crushing wave of humanity. Bottleneck. Compression asphyxia risk. Izuku didn't run forward. He braced his legs against the sides of the tunnel entrance, activating one for all at 5%. Green sparks crackled. Stop pushing! He roared, his voice amplified by the sheer force of his lungs. He grabbed the students nearest to the walls, students who were being crushed against the concrete, and physically hurled them forward, over the heads of the crowd. Move! Keep spacing. He acted as a human flow regulator, pulling people out of the crush until the initial surge thinned out. Only then did he run. He was dead last. And they're off! Mike screamed. But what's this? Class A's Midoriya is bringing up the rear. A slow start for the favorite. Izuku ignored the commentary. He burst out of the tunnel into the blinding sunlight. Ahead, the first obstacle awaited. The Robo Inferno. The massive zero-pointers from the entrance exam loomed over the track, blocking the path. Todoroki was already moving, freezing a massive robot in a precarious, off-balance pose and running underneath it. Stupid, Todoroki muttered. It'll fall on the ones behind me. Izuku saw it happening. The robot, frozen mid-lunge, groaned. The ice was cracking. Students were running blindly into its shadow. Threat assessment, catastrophic. Get back! Izuku screamed. He launched himself into the air. He didn't run through the robot's legs. He aimed for its chest. One for all. 100%. He didn't have time to hold back. He needed to ensure the threat was neutralized completely. Smash! His fist connected with the center of the zero-pointer. The impact was deafening. Metal buckled, circuits fried, and the sheer kinetic force blasted the massive machine backward, away from the track and the students. Izuku landed in a crouch, cradling his broken right arm. The pain was white-hot, familiar, and grounding. Holy crap! A student from General Studies yelled. He one-shot it. Izuku didn't celebrate. He looked at the other two robots that were preparing to target the cluster of students. They are uncontrolled variables. Izuku ran. But he didn't run past them. He ran at them. He used his legs this time, leaping off the debris of the first robot. He delivered a devastating kick to the knee joint of the second robot, toppling it sideways into a safe zone. He's clearing the path! Kirishima yelled, hardening his skin as he ran past. Midoriya, you're crazy! This is a race, not a demolition job. Just run! Izuku gritted out, sweat pouring down his face. By the time Izuku left the first zone, the obstacles were gone. He had turned the Robo Inferno into a scrapyard. He was exhausted, breathing heavy, his right arm useless. He caught up at the fall, while others gingerly balanced on tightropes, anxious about falling into the abyss. Izuku saw the high-tension wires supporting the bridge. If the wind picks up, those wires snap. He grabbed two of the cables in his good hand, wrapping them around his waist to stabilize the bridge for the others. He shimmied across the primary support beam, moving faster than the tightrope walkers simply because he wasn't afraid of falling. He was afraid of them falling. Then came the minefield. Bakugo and Todoroki were battling for the lead. Explosions kicked up pink smoke. Izuku arrived at the edge of the field. He saw the mines buried in the dirt. Landmines. Variable yield. If someone trips, falls, and triggers a secondary mine with their head, concussion or death. Most students were picking their way through carefully. Izuku took a breath. He looked at his broken arm. He looked at his legs. I have to clear it. I have to make it safe. He didn't use a piece of metal to surf. He didn't use an explosion to fly. He just ran. When he stepped on a mine, he didn't jump away. He stomped down. Boom! The explosion engulfed him. The crowd gasped. Midoriya! Uraraka screamed from behind. Out of the smoke, a figure emerged. Izuku was flying through the air, propelled by the blast. His pea uniform was singed, his skin blackened with soot. He had timed his jump perfectly to ride the shockwave, using his iron-hard muscles to tank the shrapnel and heat. He landed on the next mine. Boom! He was a human cannonball, bouncing from explosion to explosion. He wasn't avoiding the danger, he was absorbing it. With every detonation, he cleared a safe spot for the students behind him. He's tanking the mines. Mike yelled, his voice cracking. What is this kid made of? Bakugo and Todoroki looked back, hearing the rhythmic, thunderous explosions approaching. They saw Izuku Midoriya, surrounded by smoke and green lightning, flying toward them like a demon of war. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and terrifyingly focused. Out of the way! Izuku screamed. He wasn't trying to pass them. He saw a cluster of mines right in front of Todoroki. Too many. If Todoroki stepped there, the chain reaction would be too big. Izuku launched himself over Todoroki's head and slammed both feet into the cluster. Kaboom! The force was immense. It blasted Izuku forward, tumbling him over the finish line. He skidded across the dirt, rolling to a stop. The winner is Izuku Midoriya. The stadium erupted. Izuku lay on his back, staring at the sky. His ears were ringing. His body felt like one giant bruise. Todoroki crossed the line second, staring at Izuku with a mixture of confusion and horror. Bakugo crossed third, looking ready to murder someone. You! Bakugo panted, standing over Izuku. You didn't even look at the finish line. You were looking at the ground. Izuku sat up slowly. He coughed out a puff of pink smoke. The mines were too dense in Sector 4, Izuku rasped. Cleared them. You're insane, Bakugo whispered. Event 2, the cavalry battle. 10 million points, Midnight announced, licking her lips. The one who takes down the winner, gets it all. The eyes of every student in the arena turned to Izuku. It was a predator's gaze. Izuku stood alone, his broken arm now set in a splint by Recovery Girl, though she had warned him that one more impact would require surgery. Midoriya! Uraraka ran up to him. Let's team up. Are you sure? Izuku asked, scanning the crowd. I'm a target. The danger level around me will be extreme. That's why you need friends, she smiled, though her hands were trembling. I need defense, Izuku muttered. He looked around. Tokoyami-kun. Dark Shadow is the best omnidirectional guard. And Hatsum-san. Mei Hatsum was already inspecting Izuku's splint. I saw you in the race. You're reckless on your equipment. I have perfect babies to keep you intact. I don't need mobility, Izuku told her as they formed up. I need armor. I need a fortress. The formation. Rider, Izuku Midoriya. Front horse, Ochako Uraraka. Mobility/evasion. Left wing, Fumikage Tokoyami. Defense/range. Right wing, Mei Hatsum. Support/gear. Start. The moment the horn blew, the assault was instantaneous. Team Tetsu, Team Hagakure, Team Shinso, they all rushed the center. Dark Shadow, Izuku commanded. The shadow monster erupted, forming a dome over the team. We aren't moving, Izuku said calmly. We hold the center, but they'll surround us. Tokoyami warned. Let them. As Team Tetsu charged, their metal skin gleaming, Izuku activated full cowling. But it was different. It wasn't the fluid lightning of a fighter. It was static, heavy. Hatsum, deploy the barriers. Hatsum cackled, activating the hydraulic shield strapped to her arms and Tokoyami's. Clang. Tetsu punched the shield. He didn't get through. Uraraka, float us. 1 meter off the ground, they hovered, removing friction. Then came the heavy hitters. Team Bakugo was diving from the sky. Bakugo aimed an explosion right at Izuku's face. Die DKU. Izuku didn't dodge. He raised his good arm. He didn't punch. He caught Bakugo's wrist midair, inches before the explosion triggered. He squeezed. Too close, Izuku growled. He used Bakugo's own momentum to swing him around, throwing the entire opposing team away like a ragdoll. He's not running, President Mike shouted. He's hunkering down. It's the fortress strategy. For 15 minutes, it was a siege. Todoroki tried to freeze them, but Izuku had Uraraka float them high above the ice, while Dark Shadow smashed the encroaching glaciers. Bakugo tried to blast through, but Hatsum's gadgets, automated smoke bombs and flashbangs, disoriented him every time he got close. It wasn't a battle for points. It was a bodyguard detail. Izuku stood atop his team, his eyes scanning 360 degrees, deflecting quirks with flicks of air pressure and raw intimidation. When the buzzer sounded, Team Midoriya still had the 10 million headband. They hadn't taken a single other headband. They hadn't attacked anyone. They had simply refused to be broken. We did it! Uraraka cheered, releasing the gravity. Izuku slumped forward, exhaling a breath he felt he'd been holding for 20 minutes. Status report. Any injuries? We're fine, Midoriya, Tokoyami said, looking at Izuku with newfound respect. Your defense was impenetrable. Good, Izuku whispered. Good. Intermission, the flame. Izuku walked through the concrete halls toward the waiting rooms for the final tournament. He needed water. He needed to retape his fingers. You. The voice was deep, resonating with heat. Izuku stopped. Leaning against the wall was the number 2 hero, Endeavor. The man was a tower of muscle and fire, his presence suffocating. Endeavor, Izuku said, bowing slightly. I saw your quirk, Endeavor said, ignoring the pleasantries. It's powerful. Brute force. Like All Might's. It's a work in progress, Izuku said defensively. My son, Shoto. He has the duty to surpass All Might, Endeavor said, stepping closer. The heat radiating from him was uncomfortable. His left side is his true power. You seem to be an obstacle. I expect you to be a good stepping stone for him. Izuku looked at the man. He analyzed him instantly. Ego, fragile. Ambition, obsessive. Parenting style, abusive. Izuku thought of Todoroki's sad, angry eyes. He thought of the way Todoroki refused to use his fire, hindering his own thermal regulation. He's not a stepping stone, Izuku said quietly. Endeavor paused. Excuse me? Izuku looked up. He didn't look at Endeavor as a fanba looks at a hero. He looked at him as a safety officer looks at a hazard. Your son is unstable, Izuku stated. He is fighting against his own body because of you. If he overheats or freezes up in the field, he becomes a liability to civilians. You aren't training a hero, you're building a bomb with a faulty timer. Endeavor's flames flared, his eyes widening in rage. You insolent child, I'm going to stop him, Izuku interrupted. Not to be a stepping stone, but because someone needs to defuse him before he hurts himself, or someone else. Izuku walked away before the number 2 hero could respond. His heart was pounding, but his resolve was iron. Event 3, the tournament. The bracket moved quickly. Izuku defeated Hitoshi Shinso in the first round. It wasn't a fight. Shinso brainwashed him, told him to walk out of bounds, but as Izuku turned to walk, his eyes swept over the crowd. He saw a structural weakness in the handrail near the exit. Safety hazard. The command walk out of bounds conflicted with the command protect. The override was violent. One for all sparked, breaking his finger to snap him out of the trance. He didn't attack Shinso. He simply grabbed the boy, threw him out of bounds to safety, and won by default. Now, it was the semi-finals. Midoriya Izuku vs Todoroki Shoto. The air in the stadium was cold even before they stepped onto the platform. Cementos had built a standard ring, but everyone knew it wouldn't look like that for long. Start. Todoroki didn't hesitate. He stomped his right foot. A glacier erupted. It wasn't the precise ice he used in training. It was a tidal wave. It rose higher than the stadium lights, rushing toward Izuku with the force of an avalanche. Midoriya! Present Mike yelled. Izuku stood his ground. He didn't have time to dodge. If he dodged, the ice would hit the wall behind him, the wall that separated the ring from the front row of the audience. The concrete wouldn't hold. Threat to audience, imminent. Izuku cocked his middle finger. 100%. Delaware smash. He flicked. The air pressure hit the glacier like a cannonball. The ice shattered, exploding into a million glittering shards. The wind blast was so powerful it knocked spectators in the back row off their feet. You're shivering, Todoroki, Izuku called out. The mist cleared. Izuku stood there, his finger purple and broken. Todoroki was encased in frost, his breath visible. Why don't you die? Todoroki muttered, sending another wave. Smash. Another finger. Another explosion of ice. It's too cold. Izuku yelled over the wind. You're lowering the ambient temperature of the arena too fast. The concrete is contracting. Use your fire to stabilize the pressure. Shut up. Todoroki screamed. I will never use his power. It's not his. Izuku roared, taking a step forward. It's the only way to keep this fight safe. If you pass out from hypothermia, who stops the ice? You have a responsibility to your quirk. Todoroki froze. He looked at his shaking hands. He remembered his mother. He remembered the kettle. But he also remembered the words Izuku had said in the tunnel. I'll stop you. Everyone is giving it their all to be safe. Izuku yelled, holding up his mangled hand. To save people. And you're trying to win with half an ass? You're screwing around with people's safety. Something snapped in Todoroki. The memory of his mother's smile. You can be a hero. Todoroki gasped. Flames erupted. The left side of his body ignited. The heat was instantaneous and blinding. The ice that covered the arena began to melt rapidly, turning into steam. Yes! Endeavor shouted from the stands. Shoto! Finally Izuku whispered. He smiled, though it was a pained grimace. Thermal equilibrium restoring. But the reaction was too violent. The sudden shift from extreme cold to extreme heat caused the air in the stadium to expand rapidly. A massive pressure system was building. Todoroki was charging up a massive fire blast. Izuku was charging one for all. Cementos stood up. Midnight. If they clash, the blast wave will. I know. Midnight ripped her costume. Stop them. Walls of cement rose up. Go, Todoroki. Izuku yelled. Let it all out. Todoroki fired. A massive beam of superheated flame. Izuku leaped. He wound up his fist, but in that split second of slow motion, Izuku's eyes darted to the side. The rapid heating of the giant ice stalagmites remaining on the edge of the field had caused a fracture. A massive chunk of ice, weighing at least 2 tons, cracked loose. It wasn't falling toward Izuku. It wasn't falling toward Todoroki. The explosion of air from Todoroki's ignition had pushed it. It was flying toward the commentary box, directly at Eraserhead and Present Mike. Calculation: Aizawa is injured. He cannot dodge. Mike is not a physical type. Objective change. Izuku was mid-air. He had the shot. He could hit Todoroki's fire, create a stalemate, maybe even win. But the ice block was moving. Save. Izuku twisted his body in mid-air. The torque shredded the muscles in his back. He turned away from Todoroki. He aimed his 100% smash not at the fire, but at the flying ice block. Smash! The air cannon obliterated the ice block instantly, turning it into harmless snow. But Izuku was now defenseless. Todoroki's fire blast, unchecked, slammed into Izuku's exposed back. Boom! The explosion shook the entire campus. A mushroom cloud of steam and dust rose into the sky. The crowd went silent. When the dust settled, the arena was a ruin. The cement walls were melted slag. Todoroki stood panting, his left side blazing, his right side frozen. He looked around wildly. Midoriya? He saw him. Izuku was out of bounds. He was embedded in the concrete wall below the commentator's booth. His shirt was burned away. His back was a mass of burns. He was unconscious, but Aizawa and Present Mike were safe. The debris that would have crushed them was gone. Midoriya is out of bounds, Midnight announced, her voice shaking. Todoroki wins. There was no cheering. The silence was heavy. Class 1A stared from the stands. Uraraka covered her mouth. He turned away. He had the shot, Bakugo whispered, his eyes wide. The nerd had the shot. Why did he turn? The ice, Ida said, pointing to the snow falling near the teacher's booth. A piece broke off. He intercepted it. Bakugo gripped the railing until the metal bent. He didn't lose, Bakugo growled. He forfeited. Recovery girl's office 1 hour later. You are the most troublesome patient I have ever had, Recovery girl said, kissing Izuku's forehead. And I treated All Might in his prime. Izuku lay on the bed, bandaged from neck to waist. The burns were healing, but the scarring would remain. Did anyone get hurt? Izuku mumbled, his eyes groggy. No, All Might's voice came from the corner. Because of you. Izuku relaxed. Good. Mission successful. Young Midoriya, All Might stepped into the light. He looked angry. You lost the sports festival. You lost the chance to show the world you are the next #1. I showed them, Izuku whispered. Showed them what? That they're safe, Izuku said, closing his eyes. That even when the stadium is exploding, the walls will hold. All Might stared at his successor. He wanted to scold him. He wanted to tell him that a symbol of peace has to win to inspire. But as he recalled the terrified faces of the crowd when the ice broke, and the collective sigh of relief when Izuku vaporized it, he couldn't find the words. Izuku Midoriya wasn't becoming the symbol of peace. He was becoming the symbol of protection. The Aegis. And All Might wasn't sure if the boy's body could survive the transformation. The classroom was buzzing with the chaotic energy of teenagers comparing internship offers, but the noise felt distant to Izuku Midoriya. He sat at his desk, staring at the slip of paper in his hand. Total nominations 35. It was a respectable number, considering he had lost the sports festival in the second round and spent the rest of the time in the infirmary. But looking at the names on the list, he noticed a pattern. Gunhead Battle Hero Agency. Fourth kind. Uwabami. They were heroes known for durability, crowd control, or surveillance. The pros had seen what he was doing. They didn't see a symbol of peace. They saw a riot shield. Midoriya Shonen. All Might appeared at the door, motioning for him. Izuku followed him into the hallway, away from the prying eyes of the class. I have a suggestion for you, All Might said, holding out a specific offer form. This came in late. It's from an old acquaintance of mine. Gran Torino. Izuku took the paper. Gran Torino? I haven't heard of him in the current top charts. He's retired. He was my homeroom teacher for a brief time, All Might said, a visible shiver running down his spine. He taught me how to fight. If you want to learn how to control one for all so you stop breaking yourself, He is the only choice. Izuku looked at the name. Control. His mind flashed back to the USJ. To the Nomu. To the sports festival, where he had to shatter his own fingers to create air pressure because he couldn't close the distance fast enough. I am slow, Izuku analyzed. I have power, but my deployment time is sluggish. To be an effective shield, I need to be at the point of impact before the impact occurs. I need interception speed. I'll take it, Izuku said, his grip tightening on the paper. Good. All Might smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. But young Midoriya, are you sure you're okay? You seem heavy. I'm fine, Izuku lied effortlessly. Just focused. Back in the classroom, the atmosphere was lighter. I got an offer from Best Jeanist. Bakugo was yelling, though he looked annoyed by it. I'm going with Iwabumi, Yaoyoro's aside. Izuku walked back to his desk, passing Tenya Ida. The class representative was staring at his desk, his glasses reflecting the overhead lights, hiding his eyes. Ida-kun? Izuku paused. Where are you going? Ida didn't look up immediately. When he did, his expression was a mask of forced calm. Hosa City. Manuel's agency. Izuku's internal threat alarm pinged. Hosa City. The location where Ingenium was attacked by the hero killer, Stain. Manuel is a normal hero, focusing on civil support. Not a combat specialist. Ida is a speed type. Why choose a civil support hero in a high crime zone? Hypothesis. Pursuit of vengeance. Ida, Izuku said, his voice dropping an octave. Don't do it. Ida stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't know what you mean, Midoriya. It is a logical choice to learn community heroism. You're hunting him, Izuku whispered. The hero killer. This is none of your business, Ida snapped. It was the first time Ida had ever spoken to him with genuine coldness. You focus on your path. I will focus on mine. Ida walked away. Izuku watched him go. He pulled out his notebook and flipped to the page titled Tenya Ida. Status, compromised. Emotional state unstable. Judgment clouded. Threat level to self, critical. Izuku looked down at his own offer sheet. Gran Torino's agency was in Kofu, Yamanashi. It was nowhere near Hosu. I can't cover him, Izuku thought, a spike of anxiety piercing his chest. I can't be his shield if I'm 3 prefectures away. But he couldn't force Ida to stop. All he could do was prepare. Kofu's city, Gran Torino's apartment. Who are you? The old man lay in a pool of what looked like blood but smelled like ketchup. Izuku stood in the doorway, his luggage in hand, unfazed. Scenario: deceptive entry. Target is feigning injury or senility to test reaction time. I am Izuku Midoriya, Izuku said, stepping over the sausages. And your blood pressure is fine. Gran Torino sat up, wiping the ketchup from his mouth. Smart aleck. Tashinori said you were a nervous wreck? You look like a funeral director. I'm here to learn, Izuku said, setting his bag down. I need to be faster. Faster? Gran Torino hopped onto his feet, bouncing slightly. Why? To intercept, Izuku said. Not to hit? Hitting is secondary. If I hit the villain, but the hostage takes damage, the mission is a failure. I need to be between the threat and the target instantly. Gran Torino narrowed his eyes. He launched himself off the floor, ricocheting off the walls with blinding speed. Then try to stop me. He came in low, aiming a kick at Izuku's legs. Izuku didn't counterattack. He dropped into a low guard, crossing his arms. Clang. The kick hit Izuku's guard. Izuku slid back a few inches but didn't falter. Torino bounced off the ceiling and came down for an overhead strike. Izuku shifted, raising his arm to deflect the blow to the side, protecting his head. For 10 minutes, Gran Torino turned into a yellow blur, striking from every angle. Izuku didn't throw a single punch. He pivoted, blocked, parried, and tanked. Stop! Gran Torino landed on top of the microwave. He was breathing heavily, but Izuku was barely winded, though his arms were bruising. You're stiff, Torino criticized. You're fighting like a statue. You think being a shield means standing still and taking a beating? It worked at the USJ, Izuku said, and you ended up in the hospital. Torino barked. And what happens if there are 2 villains? Or 3? While you're busy playing punching bag for one, the other kills your friends. A shield that can't move is just a wall. And walls can be walked around. Izuku froze. Walked around. He thought of the Noma. It had targeted Tsuyu because Izuku was occupied with the wind pressure. One for all isn't a toggle switch, Torino said, tapping his chest. It's a fluid. You're using it like a cannon. Load, fire, break. You need to wear it like a suit. A suit. Izuku muttered. He closed his eyes. He visualized the power. Usually, he imagined the egg in the microwave, an explosive force. Change the metaphor. It's not an explosion. It's armor. It's a second skin. He let the energy flow. Not just to his arm, but everywhere. To his toes, his neck, his back. He capped the output at 5%, the limit his bones could handle without snapping. Green lightning crackled around his body. His hair stood on end. He took a breath, and the air felt lighter. Full cowling, Izuku whispered. Better, Torino grinned. Now. Try to hit me. Izuku moved. He didn't just step, he glided. He closed the distance to the microwave in a blink. But instead of punching Torino, Izuku stopped an inch away, his fist hovering. Hesitation. Torino yelled, kicking Izuku in the face. Izuku stumbled back. I didn't hesitate, Izuku said, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. I confirmed there were no civilians behind you. The wall is thin. If I missed, I would have punched through into the neighbor's apartment. Gran Torino stared at the boy. The level of situational awareness was terrifying. But it was also crippling. Kid, Torino sighed. You're thinking too much. Sometimes you just have to smash the bug. I can't afford to be wrong, Izuku said. Hosa City 3 days later. The train ride was supposed to be a simple transit to a patrol zone. Gran Torino had decided to take Izuku into the field to test his mobility against real villains. Hosa City, Izuku murmured, looking out the window at the skyline. We're close to Ida. Stop worrying about your friend, Torino said, reading a newspaper. He's with a pro. Manuel is a localized water-type hero, Izuku recited. Effective for fire suppression and crowd control. Low combat rating against high-agility targets. If Ida engages the hero killer, Manuel cannot support him effectively. You really don't turn it off, do you? Suddenly, the train lurched. The metal screeched as the emergency brakes slammed on. What now? Torino stood up. Crash. The side of the train car exploded inward. A creature, a Noma, tore through the metal skin of the carriage. It wasn't the giant one from USJ. It was leaner, four-eyed, and beige. Passengers screamed. The Noma roared, raising a claw to swipe at the nearest civilian, a businessman frozen in terror. No! Izuku was out of his seat before Torino could even drop his paper. Full cowling. Izuku didn't kick the Noma. He shoulder-checked the businessman, tackling him out of the seat and rolling them both into the aisle. The Noma's claws shredded the upholstery where the man had been sitting a microsecond ago. Gran Torino! Izuku yelled, shielding the man with his body. I got it! The old hero launched himself, slamming his feet into the Noma's face and knocking it back out through the hole it had made. Stay here! Torino commanded. I'm going after it. Torino zoomed out into the city, leaving Izuku in the chaotic train car. Izuku stood up, helping the businessman to his feet. Are you injured? Check for lacerations. I think I'm okay, the man stammered. Izuku looked out the hole in the train. Smoke was rising from the city. Sirens were wailing. Multiple impact zones. Fire. Screaming. This was a coordinated attack. But amidst the chaos, Izuku's mind locked onto one variable. Hosa City is under attack. The League of Villains is here. If the League is here, chaos is the objective. The hero killer operates in chaos. Ida. Izuku pulled out his phone. He dialed Ida. No answer. He checked the GPS tracker. Class 1A shared their locations for safety, a protocol Ida had insisted on. Ironically, Ida's signal wasn't near the evacuation center. It wasn't near Manuel's agency. It was in a back alley in the Shibuya district, 3 blocks away from the main conflict. Stationary. I have to go, Izuku said to the train conductor. Evacuate the passengers to the rear cars. Wait, kid! It's dangerous. Izuku didn't listen. He jumped out of the hole in the train. He landed on a rooftop and began to run. Green lightning wreathed his body. He didn't run with the joy of flight. He ran with the desperation of an ambulance. Please don't be dead. Please don't be dead. The alleyway. The smell of blood was heavy in the narrow space between the buildings. It was a metallic, coppery tang that coated the back of the throat. Tenya Ida lay on the ground, unable to move. His armor was battered, his helmet knocked off. A sword was stabbed through his shoulder, pinning him to the asphalt. Native, the pro-hero he had tried to save, or rather, used as bait, was slumped against the wall, bleeding out. Standing over them was the hero killer, Stain. You are weak, Stain rasped, his long tongue flicking over a blade. You are not a hero. You are a child throwing a tantrum. You came here for revenge, using your own name for selfish desire. You are a cancer to society. Shut up! Ida screamed, tears streaming down his face. You killed my brother! You crippled him! I will kill you! See? Stain raised his katana, pointing the tip at Ida's neck. No conviction. Only hate. Ingenium was a fake. And you are just kindling. Stain raised the blade high. Goodbye, false hero. The blade descended. Ida squeezed his eyes shut. Smash. It wasn't a punch. It was the sound of metal hitting metal with the force of a car crash. Ida opened his eyes. Sparks rained down. Standing over him was a figure in a green jumpsuit. Izuku Midoriya had arrived. But he hadn't punched Stain. He had caught the katana blade between his gauntlet palms. The force of his arrival had cracked the pavement beneath his boots. The blade was stopped inches from Ida's throat. Midoriya? Ida gasped. Stain's eyes widened. He tried to pull the sword back, but Izuku's grip was like a vice. Get away from him, Izuku growled. His voice didn't sound like a teenager's. It sounded like a growl from the depths of a cave. Izuku twisted his hips and shattered the blade. Snap! Shards of metal clattered to the floor. Stain leaped back, creating distance. He assessed the newcomer instantly. You! The kid from the sports festival. The one who broke himself to save the crowd. Izuku didn't pursue. He planted his feet firmly in front of Ida and Native. He spread his arms slightly, assuming the Aegis stance, knees bent, center of gravity low, elbows tucked. Move, Midoriya! Ida yelled, his voice cracking with hysteria. This is my fight. He's mine! You can't move, Izuku stated flatly, not looking back. You've been cut. His quirk is likely blood-based paralysis. Based on the time Native has been down, it has a duration. I told you to leave! Ida screamed. I have to kill him. For Tensei, if you want to kill him, you have to survive first. Izuku shouted back. Shut up and stay behind me. Stain smiled beneath his mask. A protector. Finally. Someone worth killing. Stain moved. He was faster than the Nomu in terms of agility. He bounced off the walls, a blur of knives and killing intent. Izuku's eyes tracked him. Knife incoming. Left side. Aiming for my femoral artery. Izuku didn't dodge. If he dodged, the knife would fly past him and hit Native. Izuku shifted his leg, taking the blade in his thigh guard. The metal pierced the armor and sank into his flesh. Guh! Izuku grunted, but he didn't retreat. He grabbed Stain's wrist. Got you. Izuku delivered a short, controlled blast of air pressure with his free hand into Stain's chest. It wasn't enough to break ribs, but it knocked the wind out of the killer, forcing him back. Stain flipped backward, landing in a crouch. He licked the blood from his knife, Izuku's blood. Izuku stumbled. His body went rigid. Paralysis. No! Ida cried. Midoriya! It works on blood type, Stain muttered, spitting. Typo, short duration. Stain walked forward slowly. He spun a jagged dagger in his hand. You are a true hero. You prioritize the weak. I will make your death quick. Izuku stood frozen, his muscles locked. His mind was racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Can't move. Can't block. He's going to kill Ida first. He thinks I'm the threat. He'll neutralize the Avenger, then honor kill me. Stop. Izuku hissed through clenched teeth. Stain stepped past Izuku, raising the dagger toward Ida. No! Izuku forced one for all to surge. Not through his muscles, which were chemically locked, but through the very nerves. He visualized the lightning jump-starting a dead battery. Move! Move! With a sickening crack, Izuku forced his right arm to move, fighting the paralysis with sheer brute force and adrenaline. He couldn't punch, but he could fall. Izuku threw his weight sideways, collapsing on top of Ada just as Stain thrust the dagger. Thunk! The dagger buried itself in Izuku's shoulder blade. Midoriya! Ida screamed, watching his friend's blood spatter onto his own face. Izuku gritted his teeth, tears of pain pricking his eyes. I am the wall. Stain paused. He looked at the boy who had just used his own body as a meat shield while paralyzed. Impressive, Stain whispered. Suddenly, the air grew hot. A wall of fire erupted down the alleyway, forcing Stain to retreat rapidly. One after another, Stain growled, shielding his eyes. Shoto Todoroki stood at the entrance of the alley, his left side ablaze, his phone in his hand. Midoriya, Todoroki said, his voice calm but his eyes furious. You need to give more details than just sending your location. I almost didn't make it, Todoroki. Izuku wheezed. The paralysis was fading. He pulled the dagger out of his shoulder with a wet squelch. Don't let him. Get close to them. I know, Todoroki said. He unleashed a wave of ice. The battle shifted. Izuku forced himself to stand. He was bleeding from his thigh and shoulder. His arm was screaming. But he fell into position. Todoroki. Izuku barked orders. He relies on close quarters. Keep him at range. Cover the walls. Don't let him bounce. Understood. Todoroki flooded the vertical surfaces with ice, removing Stain's footholds. Stain was cornered, but he was far from beaten. He threw knives with deadly precision. One knife flew toward Todoroki's face. Izuku was there. He intercepted the knife with his iron-soled boot, kicking it out of the air. Covering you! Izuku yelled. Attack now! Todoroki blasted fire. Stain dodged, diving low. He's going for native! Izuku realized. Stain was indeed changing targets, aiming to execute the pro-hero while the students were distracted. Izuku didn't have the speed to reach native in time. I can't reach. I have to be the projectile. Todoroki. Ice wall behind me. Now. Todoroki didn't question it. He erected a pillar of ice behind Izuku. Izuku used it as a starting block. He channeled 15%, breaking his limit. Detroit smash, bullet. He launched himself like a missile. He didn't aim at Stain. He aimed at the space in front of native. He arrived with a sonic boom, slamming into the ground and creating a shockwave that blew Stain backward just as his blade touched native's skin. Izuku stood in the crater, panting. Blood ran down his arm, dripping from his fingertips. Ida? Izuku didn't look back. He kept his eyes on Stain. Stand up. Ida was sobbing on the ground. I can't move. Not your body. Your will. Izuku roared. The sound was terrifying. Look at me. Look at what your vengeance is costing. I'm bleeding because of you. Native is dying because of you. If you want to be ingenium, then stand up and save someone. The words hit Ida harder than any punch. He looked at Izuku's back, the back that was riddled with scars and fresh wounds. He saw the Aegis standing firm against the monster. Ida's fingers twitched. The paralysis was wearing off. Recipro. Burst. Ida forced his engines to ignite. Blue flames sputtered then roared. Stain lunged at Izuku again, sensing the boy was reaching his limit. Die. Stain swung his sword. Izuku raised his broken arms to block. Clang. A steel leg intercepted the blade. Ida kicked Stain's sword arm, shattering the blade's hilt. I will. Ida gasped, standing beside Izuku. I will not let you shed any more blood for me. Izuku grinned, his teeth red. About time, speedster. Todoroki. Izuku yelled. Flash freeze. Got it. Ida? High kick. Yes. I'll take the low road. Izuku dropped low, sweeping Stain's legs with a full cowling kick. Ida delivered a recipro-powered kick to Stain's head. Todoroki encased the villain in a massive glacier the moment he hit the ground. Stain was unconscious. The alley went silent. Izuku stood for a second, then collapsed. Midoriya! Todoroki caught him before he hit the ground. Is everyone safe? Izuku mumbled. We're safe, Todoroki said softly. You did it. The aftermath. They dragged Stain out to the street. The police arrived quickly, along with Gran Torino, who kicked Izuku in the head immediately. I told you to stay on the train. Ida was in danger, Izuku slurred, leaning against the wall. You're full of holes, kid, Torino sighed, looking at the stabbed wounds. Suddenly, a screech tore through the air. A flying Nomu, one that had been evading Endeavor, swooped down. It wasn't aiming for the heroes. It was aiming for the unconscious Stain. It's retrieving the asset. A pro-hero yelled. Without thinking, Izuku moved. His leg was numb. His shoulder was on fire. But the logic held. Stain is a prisoner. Prisoners are assets. Assets must be protected. Izuku lunged, grabbing Stain's unconscious body and pulling him out of the Nomu's talons. But in doing so, Izuku exposed himself. The Nomu's claws raked across Izuku's chest, tearing through his costume and skin. Gah! Izuku fell, clutching Stain. The pain woke Stain up. The hero killer opened his eyes. He saw the Nomu circling back for the kill. He saw the green-haired boy bleeding on top of him, trying to shield him, the villain. You! Stain whispered. Stain's hand moved. Not for a weapon. He found a knife dropped by the police in the scuffle. Stain licked the blood from the Nomu's claw that was stuck in Izuku's vest. Paralysis. The flying Nomu froze in midair and crashed into the pavement. Stain stood up. He staggered. The bandage on his face fell off. His nose was missing. His aura exploded. The heroes, Endeavor, Gran Torino, the police, froze. The sheer bloodlust radiating from Stain was palpable. It felt like icy hands gripping their hearts. Fake. Stain rasped. He stepped over Izuku. He looked down at the boy. Izuku looked up, his vision blurring. You represent everything wrong with this society, Stain spat at Endeavor. Then he looked at Ida. You have begun to learn. Finally, he looked at Izuku. But you... Stain pointed a shaky finger at Izuku. You are the only one worthy. Stain turned to face the pros. Come on. Try and stop me, you fakes. The only one allowed to kill me is All Might, and him. Stain's intent was so strong it paralyzed Endeavor. But his body had reached its limit. A broken rib from Ida's kick punctured a lung. Stain stood there, unconscious, but still standing. Izuku watched him until his own consciousness faded. He protected me? Izuku thought as the darkness took him. Why? Hosted General Hospital the next morning. The sun was too bright. Izuku woke up in a hospital bed. His left leg was in a cast. His shoulder was heavily bandaged. His chest felt like it had been put through a shredder. In the beds next to him lay Ida and Todoroki. You're awake, Todoroki said. He was peeling an orange. Eat this. Izuku took a slice. Thanks. The door opened. Gran Torino walked in, followed by a tall man with the head of a dog. Chief Kenji Tsurigami, Gran Torino introduced. The chief explained the situation. Unlicensed quirk use. Vigilantism. The strict laws. However, the chief said, if the credit were to go to Endeavor, the public would not need to know about 3 students breaking the law. You would face no punishment. Ida clenched his fists on his bedsheets. Thank you? And? I am sorry. The chief bowed and left. Gran Torino lingered. You got lucky, kid, Torino said to Izuku. But your arm. Recovery girl says your bones are getting denser, but the connective tissue is wearing down. You keep taking hits like that, you won't be able to hold a cup of tea by the time you're 20. I saved them, Izuku said. At what cost? Torino asked. Stain let you live because he respected your sacrifice. The next villain won't have that code. Torino left. The room was quiet. Midoriya Ida spoke up. His voice was thick with emotion. Yeah? My hand. Ida held up his left hand. It was bandaged heavily. The nerve damage is permanent. I may never have full dexterity in this hand again. Izuku looked at his own scars. I'm sorry, Ida. No, Ida shook his head. Tears fell onto his lap. You were right. In the alley? I was weak. I was selfish. I made you bleed for my vendetta. Ida turned to look at Izuku. The look in his eyes had changed. The arrogance was gone. You stood in front of me, Ida whispered. You took the knife. You took the paralysis. You took everything. That's my job, Izuku said simply. It shouldn't be. Ida shouted, startling Todoroki. We are supposed to be equals. But you act like your life is disposable. It hurts, Midoriya. It hurts to watch my friend destroy himself to save me because I was too stupid to listen. Izuku looked down at his hands. If I didn't, you would be dead.